Yeah. Yes, so Professor Bashubi, glad to have you. So I think I was saying that this particular conclave is titled Liberal Arts and the Future of Social Sciences in India, which is hosted by the Department of Social and Political Studies, School of Behavioral and Social Sciences, Manav Rachna International Institute of Research and Studies. So largely the purpose that we have gathered here today, virtually though, is to reflect on largely critical questions that shape the overall intellectual and institutional future of liberal arts education and the overall social sciences in our country. Now, in a time of growing disruptions and a renewed call for indigenization of knowledge systems, maybe, or in India, as we call it, the IKS or Indian knowledge system, how do we even define the social sciences from an Indian context? And how do we innovate, be it pedagogically or politically or philosophically in our own disciplines? Now, to help us navigate with all these vital questions, we have divided every panelist with a particular problem statement, maybe. I hope that the audience that have joined us, if you have any questions for the panelists, we are having an open forum at the end of the talk. So every panelist will get at least 15 minutes to give their opening arguments, and then we can have an open forum where you can raise your hands and I can allow you to either write your questions or your observations, or we can allow you to be a co-panelist and you can unmute yourself and give your own observation or questions. So the first speaker is someone very special, and I would like to thank Ashish sir as well for bringing him on board. He's a professor of English at Deshbandhu College, Delhi University. He's a creative writer in Malayalam and in English and has published over 5 books. He has edited the Gabriel Garcia Marquez Chronicle of a Death Foretold, and his debut novel in Malayalam, Keralam Oru Documenta, won the Karud Nilakanta Pillai Award in 2016 and Abu Dhabi Shakti Award and Yes Press Novel Award in 2018. His latest book is on the Italian philosopher and theorist Giorgio Agamben, published as part of the Theory series by the SBSS Kottayam, Kerala in 2016. Now, I can go on. I think he has a very extensive biography. His articles on art have appeared in many magazines, be it Marg, Lalit Kala Academy Journal, Chitravarta, published by the Lalit Kala Academy, and in Art and Deal. Largely, he has been publishing several articles on art practices. And we thought that a topic which is titled Crafting an Indian Canon, Language, Literature, and the Nation is apt for such a personality like Dr. Krishna Unni. So the larger element that at least I am interested in from this particular theme will be how languages or literature in general shapes our national imagination, and why maybe crafting this particular canon that we are calling the Indian canon is central to the future of liberal arts education in India. So Dr. Krishna Nundi, the floor is yours. You have at least, if we can start with 15 minutes, then we
Yes,
can
sure.
shift the panel. Thank you so much, everyone. Dr. Krishna Nundi.
Good morning, everyone, and let me express my gratitude to Manav Rachna University, all the organizers who have come forward for such a kind of conclave at a very, very important critical juncture when the whole universities across India are going through peculiar kind of issues, peculiar problems. I would say these problems fundamentally are the problems that stem from different kinds of people who have joined in the university and the changing patterns and curriculum which we are having, and also a paradigm shift that has happened in the university in the past, that has been happening in the university across in the past 1.5 decade, which the momentum accentuated in the last few years with the NEP, New Education Policy. I hope I am audible to everyone, and I am just, putting my ideas across. Well, though I am a professor of literature, English, I have been inculcating in my classrooms, in my lectures, through my writings, a number of ideas which are connected to several systems of knowledges, and most of them deeply related to contextualizing the canon. Because when we look at a canon is itself at times is a deeply problematic concept. When you look at canon, we never can forget the fact that canon, there is a power equation that is connected to the canon. Canon is a formation of different kinds of power relations, whether in the West or in the East. This is not something that is happening only in literature. This is something which is happening across all disciplines, in science, in social sciences, and in humanities. So how to decontextualize the canon? That has always been one of my primary motives in the classrooms. And also when I engage with the students in various ways, when I give them assignments, when I tell them to go and explore some of the site-specific relations that need to be brought in their lectures or in their assignments or in their presentations. Definitely, I always used to follow this idea that you need to decontextualize the canon. So that is the primary idea. So you don't have to go by the definitions, the straight-jacketed definitions of a canon anywhere. There is no such canonical, definition in literature, though we are having a lot of canonical literatures, right from the Bible or from the classics or from the any other ones. We are having a lot of those kinds of things. But most of these things ultimately will put the teaching community as well as the students in a lurch because they never develop out of the canon. So the mere idea of the canon itself proposes a fundamental difficulty that how to decontextualize the canon. So one need to decontextualize the canon when we look at the larger framework of indigenous knowledge systems and whole lot of things. Now there is the second problem which I would like to address here is when we look at literature as national discourse. Of course, literature plays a very, very crucial role in a national discourse. There is no doubt of it. But what is a nation? Can one define the nation through literatures or can one define the nation through certain other modalities? That becomes a primary challenge. And how do we face this challenge? In order to face this challenge, I have been telling my students to move out of the pattern, to move out of the studying literature as literature just like that. However, on the contrary, you need to expand your territories. You need to expand your ideas outside the streams of literature. And how do we expand it? Because the textual knowledge which is percolated in the classrooms, that need to be widened, across. In order to widen that, you should have a kind of a journey out of the textbooks, out of the particular canonical textbooks, out of the particular framework, and even the genres and the subgenres which you are familiar with, whether it is poetry, whether it is something connected to a folklore, whether it is something else which is connected to astronomy, for instance, something connected to the medical sciences, for instance, something connected to the equitable justice. Just like I am reminded of the great theoretician John Rawls, who talks about the equitable justice. So how to bring this equitable justice? Are we having an equitable justice when we look at literature as literature, or when we look at the larger relationship between literature and the nation? So in order to move out of these textbooks, one need to have a detour, a kind of a journey into perhaps some of the untangled jungles. Okay, the jungles which are very, very husky, the jungles which are very, very problematic, the jungles perhaps which will be giving you a horrendous atmosphere. And those jungles are not the fictional worlds. On the contrary, those are the spaces from where a writer, whether the writer is a writer of, whether the writer is a poet, or whether the writer is a novelist, or whether the writer is a theorist, uh, accumulates his or her material. So this is where sometimes liberal arts need to focus on. See, now the question is, being a person who is a member of the border studies in several groups, in several private universities, I do have this problem to engage while engaging with most of the academics, most of the other kinds of people there. The question of the liberal arts need to be liberated. Liberal arts itself is not something which will give you some structures. A poem which you are learning in a classroom need to be taken out of the classroom context in a wider context so that the methodology of learning the poetry will be completely changing. And while the methodology will be changing, a student from Manipur may not be able to have the same kind of a perception regarding a poem, just like a student from Kerala or from Delhi or from Haryana. That is true because the teleological construction of imagination. I want to stress on this point. The imagination which is teleologically constructed, that need to be peculiarly decentered and deconstructed in the liberal arts. And why is it need to be deconstructed? The question is, our imagination is also a historical product. There is no doubt of it. We are all historically constituted beings. So history plays a crucial role. The place from where we stem into the ideas of literature, the space from where we come across the different kinds of a discipline to inculcate a peculiar kind of a discourse. All right. So imagination sometimes can be very, very fallacious because imagination has got these multiple faculties. All right. In order to tune you to certain kind of a vested interest as far as you are concerned. Vested interest in the sense, inside a classroom, imagine the situation that if I want to be very, very dictatorial regarding one of the writers whom I like very much, and another writer who may not be, I may not be liking too much. Let us say I like Conrad because Conrad, comes up with a lot of oppositions between race, gender, class. There are different kinds of class structures in Conrad. But the point is, when I am looking at Conrad, when I talk about the race, which is a fundamental issue in Conrad, if I'm not talking about the issues of the gender and the caste, the question of the caste issues in India, or peculiarly, I will be doing an injustice against myself. Why I should talk about caste is not to bring peculiarly an Ambedkarian kind of a discourse. On the contrary, I really want to have this idea of a libertarian kind of a classroom structure, whereby, in order to understand the question of the race, my student essentially should understand the question of the caste, because caste and class are overlapping structures in our education system. There is no doubt of it. And also across all the societies, in the societies. So a Conradian understanding will also make you to understand how you are having certain very, very important trajectories as far as our caste system is concerned, and how you can further complicate this as far as liberal arts is concerned. Are you getting it? So the text is moving out of the demographic space of Congo or Sierra Leone. And the Conradian text is taking you to the inside villages, the innermost core of some of the villages in Maharashtra, perhaps, or in Bihar, or in Uttar Pradesh. And that will open your eyes to some fundamental knowledge systems. And once you get into those knowledge systems, you know that the spaces, the loci, the Indian loci has been very, very successfully manipulated, not only by the colonizers, but even by our internal systems. Indigenous systems, for instance, all the knowledge systems which we used to have regarding the medicine. Of course, we know that is in the hands of the Westerners. The patent, you are directly giving the patent to the Westerners. COVID has come. And the COVID patent also has been taken by, whole lot of, peculiar companies. The companies which are completely exploiting our indigenous cultures. The companies which are completely, while the, exploitation takes place, please remember, this is also an exploitation of a larger number of the folk culture, a larger number of the Adivasis, a larger number of the tribal people. So how to reconnect it? I'll tell you a small anecdote, which exactly happened. Ages and ages back, during the time of the Emperor Harshavardhana, that was the time when Huan Sang came to India. Huan Sang. And you know how Huan Sang came? Huan Sang came on top of mules, along with the 5, 6 different kinds of people, the various Chinese people. He was not only a travel writer, but he was a careful explorer of every system. China, come what may, we may be having thousands of problems with China. But China is the only one country in the world which was documenting everything. whereas we forgot to document many things. And the emperor treated Huan Sang very, very fascinatingly. And later, when Huan Sang went, he went to China along with some. This is we don't know the exact, because this is something which had happened in the past, and this is a kind of a repeated story. In several sacks full of our original texts. At that point of time, of course, you can understand, we do not have any kind of system to, digitize or to photocopy the original knowledge systems, original texts, because the oral cultures were there, and the great scholars knew how to transform this oral culture to the next generation. Fascinatingly, all these texts were kept in China. Some historians believe till the till the mid of the last century. And of course, you know what happened when the cultural revolution of Mao Zedong began. The first thing which Mao did was he burnt most of these things. That is vandalism, terrible vandalism. Yet another fascinating aspect you have to remember at this point is Mao Zedong himself was a librarian at one point of time before he became the Chinese premier. He was a librarian. Mao was a successful librarian, but he burnt the entire archives which were kept in China, because this kind of a vandalism. How did it happen? Fundamentally, I would say that that was a mistake, that we shouldn't have given all the texts as a kind of a token to Huanzhang or whoever may be a traveler who comes to India. Most of us have done that. Imagine if those texts would have been there with us, we still could have preserved, I believe, lot of ancient systems, maybe with some flaws or whatever, related to astronomy, related to the snake bite, related to several other medicinal systems. Because medicine, the indigenous medicine was in the full-fledged development during the time of the Mauryan Empire. There is no doubt of it. Those historians who are there, who are attending this conclave, they would be knowing better. There was a huge surge of the Westerners to understand our, indigenous cultures. Now, I will talk about two more important points. What are the impediments which we are having in the liberal education? In the liberal arts education in India, across India, face the fundamental question of the structures that envelop what is liberal. So the idea of the liberal need to be more liberalized. This is my submission. Okay, liberal itself need to be liberalized. And in order to liberalize the liberal, please understand that there should be a room for diverse ideas to come and to interact each other. Then only a dialogue will be possible. See, Foucault talks about dialogues, discourse in a very, very different way. Foucault talks about the power relations which are connected inside every enunciation, which is absolutely right. There is no doubt of it. But to diverse ideas, to conflict each other, to incriminate each other, that itself will create a different kind of a dialogue, so that our indigenous cultures, our indigenous features will definitely get an opportunity to reflect, because now we have to dig up certain things which are like a dinosaur fossils. We are digging. All the liberal arts teachers across India need to dig the archives, because most of our archives are dead and gone, dusted. They are like a dinosaur fossils inside the soil. See, this is a metaphorical, in a metaphorical way, I am telling you. So you need to dig very hard, and you need to find out that where exactly we have lost the thread. We have lost the thread precisely because many people who go to the West, even I taught in the West quite a long time. From my experience, I know that our best river, Indian river, archives are kept in Netherlands. Okay. Yet another, information regarding our, systems, transactions, which Amitav Ghosh has correctly pointed out. And I visited most of these libraries, are kept in the Chicago Library. All right, about our opium trade. It is from there I came to know that Rabindranath Tagore's grandfather was a person who was associated with this opium trade. Okay, very fascinating, isn't it? Tagore's grandfather was associated with the opium trade, huge trade. And he was also a supporter of slavery. late 18th century, slavery, he was a supporter of slavery. And he was in league with the colonizers also. It's a very fascinating structure. So all this information I received from the Chicago Library. So all these things from our hands are taken. They are usurped and they are taken by the West. But please remember, there is an internal colonialism which is still operating inside our universities. And that is something which is connected to the syllabus formation. For instance, in Manav Rachna or in Jindal University, of course, you are having a more open, wide structure for the syllabus. But we are having certain strictures upon us that you are not supposed to form a syllabus which is against the so-called concept of the nation or whatever. We know what is happening in Ashoka right now. I don't have to tell you about it. So such a kind of one-sidedness to make you understand that the nation only is one nation, that is absolutely wrong. One need to come out of that cocoon. We are having a diverse nation. Our cultures are very, very diverse. In order to maintain the democratic pattern in liberal arts education, all the diversities need to be respected. All the diversities need to be taken across a table. So when I am dining with a Northeastern professor, I am learning a lot of things from the Northeastern professor. At the same time, I am also transacting and translating a lot of my historical conditions and contingencies to that of the Northeastern professor, so that either maybe with the differences or maybe with the collusions, we can really put forward an entirely different knowledge system. That is exactly what is wanted. And this is something which is lacking in some of the private universities, despite their prestige, whether it is Mahalavijana, whether it is Jindal, or whether it is in Ashoka. Secondly, we need to have a complete organization to protect the attitude of the liberal arts as far as some of the political tendencies which are completely suppressing us, that need to be thrown out. We are not going to be shackled by the chains, or we are not going to be tackled by any kind of chains. We are not guinea pigs. Okay, any text for that matter in literature is a matter of introspection. I cannot teach in my classroom a literature text, whether it is a poem or whether it is a novel or whether it is a theory. Okay, without offering a critique, without offering a fundamental critique with respect to our time, the contemporary times where liberal arts should pop up is something that is connected to these kinds of knowledge systems, not only indigenous, and those indigenous knowledge systems should directly in tandem, collate in tandem with certain kind of, our own ideas. For instance, paintings. There are a lot of paintings I do discuss inside my classroom. And that is an opportunity to encourage the students into liberal arts. I do discuss a lot of the fallacies of the law, because our laws are very, very fluctuating. Law is created in our country in order to create another law. Law is repealed in our country in order to create another law. So how do we look at the question of law and justice, which is a very, very important subject, which we all of us are facing in liberal arts? How do we look at the question of this visual culture and the contemporary modalities of learning? That's a very, very important question. So when I talk about the paintings, for instance, just give you one example. When I give them the ideas of the tribal painters and the tribal paintings, how do they paint? What makes them, important in their attempts to portray their spaces, demographies, yes, cultures, and all those kinds of things. Definitely, they get an idea that those kinds of things need to be developed at a national platform. So, nation, I believe, ultimately, along with the Partha Chatterjee, is a kind of a derivative discourse. We do not have just one nation, or we cannot claim to have only one nation. Our nation is a nation which is an accumulation of thousands and thousands and millions of cultures. Liberal arts education also should focus on another aspect, which is connected to the disappearance of languages. You know how many languages, indigenous languages, are dying per day? We know about the indigenous birds. We know about the birds which are going extinct, animals which are going extinct. Similarly, several of our tribal languages are getting extinct per day. How can we, reclaim these tribal languages and the hidden caveats in the languages? Because inside every language, we explore an entirely different universe. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to give my submission in three major points. Number one, liberal arts education. The future of the liberal arts education in India, it completely rests on the fact that we need to find out the threads which are broken. We need to unearth lot of these knowledge systems, and we need to bring these knowledge systems with respect to a peculiar kind of contemporary politics that will encourage liberal arts. That is submission number one. My second submission is we also should take the idea of the liberal arts out of our university context. We need site specific experimentations. Let all of us, academics, teachers, students, let go to specific sites, not only the historical sites. Let us visit the villages. Let us go to the places where the fishermen communities are located. Let us go to all the kotis. Let us go to the places where, alternate sexualities are having the problems. Let us go to the places which are completely, according to some power structures, which are completely cursed. And let us try to find out how to bring what is happening with these spaces. So site-specific research is a very, very important aspect which is connected to the liberal arts education in our country right now. And my third submission is, this is a very important submission, that we should not cow down before any kind of pressures. Any kind of pressures, any kind of political pressures or any kind of thing, we need to have that kind of a libertarian attitude. We need to have that kind of a freedom. We should not be cowed down before any kind of threats, whether it is national, whether it is regional, whether it is institutional. And liberal arts should come out of the strictures of these contextualized terms of the canon. Then only the liberal arts education can come forward and make us progress from darkness to the great pantheon of the sunlight. When the sun, actually fluctuates, all right, the rays are having different kinds of, power. There are infrared rays, there are ultraviolet rays, all right. So we need to have the real pantheon, just like at one point of time the Greeks used to stand. Aristotle was very peculiar regarding that. They should stand in a kind of an army. And Aristotle was the army maker of Alexander the Great. We know that. Even in our India, we are having a lot of people like that. So what happened to them? All right. This is something which we need to grapple with so that we can come forward and we can make a very, very powerful attempt to recapitulate and also to recapture the things which we have already lost. And with those kinds of things in our hands, what further we can do. Thank you. Thank you very much. I, close my submission here, and I am ready to listen to others.
Thank you so much, sir. This was a fantastic, I think, as a the first particular theme where what we call as discourse setting. You did that job for us, and I think because I know Dr. Day as well personally to a front, so I know that he might also have a lot of questions and observations on this on similar lines. And I think when I was noting it down, I think the last point that you made about the death of language, it took me back to 2017, I think, where I was reading, there was a Hindu editorial where it mentioned the death of Indian languages. And recently, I was in a conference in Guwahati, and there was a PhD scholar from Nagaland University. And his entire thesis, and that was something that really struck me, and this is, I have repeated in my classroom as well, is that, for example, some people do their research for maybe a promotion, some people do research for an escalation, maybe. This person, that really stuck me, this person was doing a PhD thesis just to save the dialect of his people because he wanted that thesis to go to the archives and
Yeah,
be
yeah,
there.
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that kind of passion, oh, and I saw that in Nagaland, and that kind of passion is still there, maybe. But the dark thing is that these are in the marginalized spaces.
Yeah.
These are very rare, maybe less than 1%, or I don't know, maybe I don't know enough about this, but this is something that really struck me about what is even liberal in a liberal arts education. And if we start problematizing it or even having conversation about it, maybe we can reach somewhere. So the next speaker is someone I think coming from a solution oriented space, if I can call it, where I think social sciences in general always has this assertion that we always problematize rather than finding something which is policy relevant. And right now, I think a lot of theses also, our supervisor also forces us that write a recommendation part. You need to come up with something that we can send back to the ministries, maybe, so that what Professor Krishna Oni said, that if this is a fight to be liberal, then we have to have something that is relevant for the policymakers as well. And maybe that is the job of an academic at this point of time. So Yash here is someone who, that's why we wanted to call him for a very long time. And I think apologies from my side that we were not able to organize something over Yash's time. But he's someone that I've been following for a very long time now, at least in public policy space, and he's doing something incredible. He's a technology policy professional with 6 years of experience at ICANN Singapore, Twitter, Indian Parliament, consulting. I think the most special part about Yash is that he has built the largest pan-India community that I know of, at least in the policy space in India. Alongside his day job in ICANN, in these past 5 years, Yash has built the publicpolicyindia.com. And if somebody from the audience is from the public policy space, because I use his website a lot for the kind of, I think he launches a lot of data sets and public policy relevant job portals and fellowship opportunities that people can access. And he's doing a brilliant job in this space, which tries to make public policy issues engaging and accessible while supporting thousands of young Indians to make a career in this particular space. So I think Yash went viral after his stint in Twitter and South Asia for a couple of years, where he was working there as a partnership role or policy space. Preceding his stint in Twitter, he also worked as an associate consultant at Chase India, a public policy advocacy and consulting firm based out of New Delhi. He's also the infamous LAMP Fellow to a four-term state cabinet minister of Assam and current member of parliament. He has also had the experience of working with Government of India, the National Institute of Advanced Studies, Pratham, BJP's National Vice President, Jay Panda's office, Teach for India, among others. So he's very young, but his experience is really great in this particular space. And personally, I have been following his work for a very long time. So over to Yash. His the topic that we thought for you was social sciences and policy making and policy in general. So from at least from my, because I'm the moderator, so I'll be a bit uh, exerting in this particular point, that at least I am interested to know the strength of social sciences from the policy world, because you are navigating it. And I think half of the time, I think Yash lives in the airport, as per his Instagram stories. So he's a well-traveled person in the policy space. So I really want to know what do you think about the future of social sciences from the policy space? Over to Yash.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Upmanyu. And hi, good morning, everyone. I know it's a Wednesday morning, so I'm sure you have better things to do. So thank you so much for tuning in. I'll try and make it worth your while. I think, just going beyond the very warm and very detailed sort of welcome introduction that Upmanyu shared about me, one thing I've learned is that whenever you go to universities, campuses, and to teach, right? I'm teaching at Ashoka for the next couple of months, and even across, even if you speak of IITs, IIMs, whatever, right? In general, on a campus, a very common question is that we have all the knowledge in the world, then why can't we fix fairly basic policy problems in India? You know, like you talk about a policy problem, maybe healthcare, education, stunting, whatever, right? And then if you Google enough, or you ask someone, you also have solutions that do X, Y, Z, and things will improve, right? Or we can fix things in a particular manner, and we'll get the outcome that we want. I mean, who does not want children to be better educated, right? For the most underprivileged Indians to have better access to healthcare, right? For everyone to have a shelter on the roof, etc., right? Including in government, right? It's not like those in government don't want this, right? So it's not for lack of trying, right? And I find myself repeating the same answer again and again, that the problem is that policy, while it's a mixture of an art and a science, right? And how I define is the art and science of a public agency solving for a public problem using public money, right? It's not a very academic definition. You'll not find this in page 900 of a 2000-page book, right? But that's how, I have seen in the last 7-8 years that it really works, right? The art and science of a public agency solving for a public problem using public money, right? So anyways, coming back to what I was saying. So while it's in part a science, it's not an exact science. It's not like, engineering, for example, or coding, where with a specific set of inputs, you'll always have the exact same set of outputs, right? Because here we're not dealing with numbers or, lines of code or syntaxes, right? We're dealing with human beings, right? It's a social science, right? Which brings me back to how you started this, Upmanu, right? How you set the premise for this sort of conversation, that in social sciences, when you're dealing with, living organisms, you really can't predict any kind of behavioral outputs and outcomes, right? And how a particular intervention might work, right? So something that might work in a particular, and as the previous speaker was mentioning, that is just there's this that huge sense of diversity in India, that even a specific policy intervention, right, could work very well in a particular state and might completely fail in the other, right? So that's why there's always that advocacy that policy making should be decentralized, to the extent feasible, right? So that stakeholders as close to the ground, so to speak, right, they have a better view of what might work, what the local culture is, what the local context is, so on and so forth, right? Now coming back to what I wanted to speak for the session to begin with, right, which is, how, and I'll just try and weave this with whatever journey I have had so far, right? It's very short as compared to everyone else on the call and in the panel, I'm sure, but nonetheless, whatever I've learned, right, which is, I started with policy because, being very honest with you, I mean, when I was growing up, my parents could barely afford my school fees. And over time, as India's economy grew, right, and as our fortunes improved, I remember I was in class 11th and I was just sitting with my granddad, and there was some news playing. You know how in television, when you have grandparents, news is just 24/7, right, on the TV. And there was this is 2011, 12, I think. There was some news to do with retail sector. And my granddad just happened to say that, if this particular law, I mean, he said it in Marwari, right, hadn't changed, then, I don't know where we would be. For context, we run like a small sort of chain of stores where I come from. Anyways, so I didn't understand anything, okay? But the only thing I understood was that, oh, government has so much power, right, that it can, really change the fortunes, right, of people for the better or for the worse, right? And I was like, okay, I want to do something in this space, right? Being very honest, that was a very impressionable age, right? So I didn't understand anything except the fact that, oh, I want to do something here, right? And I always had an interest in reading while growing up. You will always find me within newspapers and books, right? No TV, no pop culture, nothing. Even today, I live under a rock. Anyways, and got into journalism, right? Went to Symbiosis, Pune, did that for 3 years because I was like, UPSC is not my thing. If I want to do IFS, the government of India hires like single digit number of people in the general category every year, right? So I like, no, maybe I can do something else, right? Anyways, did that and got into policy through, various trials and tribulations. The broader point that I'm trying to make is three specific pointers, okay? Number one is for everyone on this call, right? Firstly, please remember the fact that there are a lot of structural factors, right? One is from the social sciences POV, but also from an economic, societal POV, which are pushing policy to become more and more prominent in the daily discourse, right? For example, when the Parliament of India passed the CSR Act in, I think this is August 2013, right? An entire industry was created overnight, right? Wherein suddenly all of India's largest companies had to give, a certain, I think 2% of their average profits to social impact activities, right? It's not like the policy space did not exist before that. No one is saying that, but really an entire sub-industry was created overnight, right? With the passage of that law, right? And then we have seen this across all of human history, that when an economy crosses a certain per capita income threshold, right, the economy becomes sufficiently complex for the need for policy actors to arise, right? And because before that, it's primarily a subsistence, raw exports, agricultural economy, right? And India crossed that again roughly, I would say 7-8 years ago, right? That threshold, I think, is $2,000 per capita, right? We are nearly a $3,000 per capita. And of course, going up and above, right? Similarly, like, with the change in the government, I would say in 2014, one good thing was they were really open to young people in the government, right? And with Niti Aayog and this ministry is hiring young professionals, and of course there's structural reasons as well, right? But you broadly get the point that acceptance is there, not only at the state level, but central level, but state level also, right? Maharashtra has a Chief Minister's Fellowship Program. Haryana has one. So many state CMs do, right? In fact, now it's also coming to policy implementation at the grassroots. I think Punjab has a District Development Fellowship where you work with district magistrates, right? And by the way, please do remember, as Prime Minister Mrs. Gandhi used to say, that there are only three people matter in this country: PM, CM, and DM, right? A district magistrate is very underrated in terms of the administrative responsibilities that they have, right? Accountability that they have, and the duties that they have to discharge, right? So that's one thing. And the number of districts in India keeps going up literally by the day. I think it's nearly 800 now, right? And states keep carving out new districts for more efficient administration, right? But anyways, keeping that aside. So this is the first thing, that there's a structural sort of, tailwind to the space for more people to be in this space and, really do their bit. But at the same time, I must warn you, public policy everywhere is a very elite enterprise. It will never be a mass employment generator. It never has, it never will be. Okay. I see, and I keep doing this post on my LinkedIn for time and again, that why you should not build a career in policy, because it's no one's job to paint a false picture, right? If you're really interested here, if you have that skill set at the background, you can figure out different things to do. And the space has also broadened quite a bit, right? But that does not mean that it will be the next IT services. No, has never happened, never will, right? So be mindful of that, right? The next bit is that even if you're, and policy regularly attracts people from a very wide diversity of background, all sorts of places, walks of life, right? Families, states, contexts, etc. And so I need to remember one thing, that there's a high chance that, your job might not give you the satisfaction, the social impact chain that you are looking for. Okay. Even if it's a job in policy, right? Because a lot of jobs in policy are 9 to 5s. You're just there doing a job, getting a paycheck, and that's fine, right? But the point being that, because I see this, I talk with multiple new people every day, right? And I see the disappointment in them after like 6 months, when they're like, oh, I joined this with this expectation that, this job will allow me to, I don't know, improve XYZ, but that's not happened. And my point is that will not happen, right? Not in all jobs, not in most jobs actually, right? So you have to, have that set of right expectations, that this is a 9 to 5. This is something I'm doing for the paycheck, right? There's the reason I started PPI, right? Because I will I'll do something for the soup, which is to pay the bills, something for the soul, right? Not everyone has to start something, right? You can volunteer with the local non-profits, NGOs, but be mindful of that, that not everything that we see online is true, that not everyone is changing the world. Otherwise, the world would have changed too much already, right? And the final bit is that not everyone has to build careers here anyways, right? But please be active citizens, be aware of what's going on, right? How does it affect you? How does it impact you, right? I don't know how many people on this call, know who their local councillor is, right? Or corporator is, or, MLA, right? Where can they reach out to get things, which are broken, fixed, right? Or, how many people know who comes above, undersecretary, joint secretary, right? Again, you might have a career in something else, that's fine, but at least have that interest in, how the state functions and how it impacts you on the day to day, right? So I'm sorry, I can speak on different aspects of these things for like the entire day, but I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thanks, Yash. I think we can come back to the questions at the end of the session. And thank you so much. I think what I wrote down was you were saying that policy will never be a space where mass recruiters will come, and I hope that never happens. Let policy be a kind of I'm not saying it should be a niche area, but definitely not. We don't want a IT sector boom that will again go worthless after a point. So it's good that there is some level of novelty in some spaces, maybe, and then again we can open the floor for other observations and questions. The next panelist that we have is Professor Bashubi Gupta. And I think after a conversation about the real aspects of policy space and navigating social science as a career and the future of liberal arts education, I think now we can develop interest maybe to look at the innovation aspect in social sciences. And we have here with us Professor Bashubi Gupta, who is a professor in Miranda House, University of Delhi. She has largely completed her education from JNU, Center for Studies in Development Studies and Center for Studies in Regional Development, School of Social Sciences, and the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. Her research interests are largely based on interweaving of social theory and technology landscapes, focused on Indian diaspora studies, associated policy development, gender, climate change, transnationalism, comparative community development, land alienation, etc., etc. So overall, what we thought was that this particular topic, we wanted someone to ideate on the innovation aspect of social sciences and whether it is actually possible to innovate in social sciences. If there are so many restrictions to navigate a social science space, but how do you create innovation with restrictions? So that might be the way I would yield my floor to Professor Gupta. Over to you, ma'am. I think we can restrict it to maybe 15 minutes so that we can end with Professor Sharon Day, and then we can have a overall question answer session. Over to you, ma'am.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to Manav Rachna University, to Mr. Dr. Santosh Singh for approaching for this very, very interesting talk. And uh, I come from the discipline of geography, which somewhere straddles the space between what is known as pure science and humanities and social sciences. So uh, I found it very apt to talk about this subject in a manner in which the other disciplines and the other subjects, or rather, it is as a major focus of even talking about something which is important. So I begin with innovation in liberal art and social sciences. I teach at the institution of, is my slide visible?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible. If you can just maximize the PPT, then I think it will be better. Yeah.
Okay.
This is better.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is better?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So basically, in the Indian university lexicon, liberal art is a very different kind of connotation and it has a very different understanding. So what is it first? Let me just unpack a little bit about what is it that we mean by liberal arts. I teach at Miranda House, which was established in 1947-48 as a liberal arts and pure sciences teaching college for women especially. Two other women's colleges existed in the University of Delhi prior to this. One was Indraprastha College. The other one is also very important. But just mentioning Miranda House, why was it important to establish a liberal arts education way back in 47-48 is something that we would be looking at. So, what is it, as I said, that I mean by liberal art and social sciences? Liberal art, I would stick to this understanding of Thomas Kuhn, who said that all significant breakthroughs are break with old ways of thinking. But when I say that a liberal arts department, a liberal arts college, so was set up with basic sciences forming the other part of the college education in 47-48, it means that this is not really something new or which has come up. It has been there. So, what is it that we mean? A liberal arts education which offers an expansive intellectual grounding in all kinds of humanistic inquiry by exploring issues, ideas, and methods across humanities and the arts, the natural sciences, and the social sciences. What we learn is to read critically, write cogently, and think broadly. These skills, which elevate our understandings and strengthen the social and the cultural analysis that we bring to our research work, is what we would like to do. So, what is rethinking innovation in the human sciences? Very recently, in the Indian panopticon, we understand that we are a post colonial country, we are a post colonial nation, and as Professor Krishnan had mentioned some time ago, that we were a host of nations, which somehow got integrated or somehow got collapsed into one nation. So, whose nation, which identity? Even today, India has multiple substreams of language, literature, culture, and divisions based on these basic aspects of our lives. So, as a post colonial nation, we have struggled with the legacy of higher education systems also, which were built by and which were for the benefit of the former colonizers. But after, say, for the 40, 50 years of educational improvement in India since 1947, many visionaries endeavored to design new culturally relevant approaches to higher education, which, while taking inspiration from the US liberal arts college models, created a different kind of situation. This was the innovation which India saw in the early 2000s. It is an interconnected world which was ushering in the forces of globalization, where the broader scopes of understandings were required to craft solutions to societal challenges. And today, young Indians are seeking an alternative to the specialized university model typical of the Indian higher education. So, what is it that we are doing in innovation, and what is it that we mean by innovation in human sciences per se? So, I had three questions which I rather asked. One was, how have Indian universities built their own liberal arts traditions? Have we built our traditions? What counts as innovation? Have Indian universities built these traditions, and what are the tensions that come along with it? What are the counter forces? What are the forces? And the last question was also very interesting for me as a researcher, that do our universities learn from each other? So, the universities which empowered students to carve out their own path of self discovery while analyzing and developing a commitment to improving their own lives and that of the nation was the base of understanding on which NEP was crafted. NEP is what we understand as the new education policy, which was broadly based on this kind of decolonization of knowledge system, open access to scholarly knowledge in the digital era, colonial influences, rethinking innovations once again. So, what were the numbers of definitions that came out? There are multiplicities of definitions of innovation, which are available across different fields in academia, in industry, government, and the service provisions. So, academic literature available relates to a wide spectrum of disciplines that can cut across discipline areas. So, this is something which I bring in here, the concept of interdisciplinarity. I would say that the innovations that we bring today to our own classrooms, what we would like to see broadly is from subjects to co-creators of knowledge. In the knowledge system, when we create, that the production of knowledge is dispersed actually across many different sites and many differences of understandings. But it is very unfortunate that metropolitan protocols of reading often end up in cognizing the knowledge practices outside certain dominant centers. For example, one of the most dominant centers is the United States, then it is United Kingdom, then it is France, then it is other universities in Europe, to the category of regional traditions. The well-intentioned gestures behind such categorical innovations are what we understand. If I were to take the example of anthropology, it is world anthropology. It is rare to find any acknowledgement, let alone a serious discussion of the theoretical inputs from these other spaces that we exist in, which is where the Indian system is facing the concept of discipline. In the NEP, the new education policy, we have inculcated the practices of GE, that is general elective courses, which are actually interdisciplinary courses which talk about fundamentals and concepts from different kinds of range of subjects. For example, uh, if we look at climate change, something which is very interesting, something which is happening, something which we are all facing. Every day we say, oh, the heat is too high. How high? Where do you measure? How do you measure? Why do you say the heat is too high? What is the perception of our understanding of heat? How are we acknowledging that perception and how are we expressing it? So these are very different types of disciplinarities that I am talking of. The hows and whys of heat measurement would be your meteorological perceptions, would be also geographical, climatological perceptions. We could measure and we could say, okay, today it is 45.6 degrees, yesterday it was 42.3 degrees. This sharp 3.5 degrees of rise in the temperature gradient of one between, say, a collapse of 24 hours is something which is important and therefore the heat is too high. People would also say, but yesterday it was not so high. How does one express that understanding of not so high? How does one talk about? Do we that expression comes through different varieties of art, that expression comes through different varieties of literature, that expression also comes through very specific means. So the categorical innovations is what we were looking at. So the locations, and what we understand as evidences, which circulate in different kinds of localized communities, become very important. And the location strongly affects the processes of both the knowledge production and the consumption, not the least through the association of certain regions with a particular type. For example, I think Dr. Krishnan had mentioned also that the study of India through the lens of caste or of, say, African societies by the say of tribes. One very interesting question that I would pose here: are African tribes the same as Indian tribes? Tribes in India per se? Or the Red American tribes? No. The definitions of tribes are very, very different as we move from one space to the other. So, therefore, reflecting on the relevance and understanding of what we are saying here is a kind of interdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity with specific reference to all our liberal arts and our humanities and social sciences departments in the Indian context, where I draw from my own experiences of being a geographer. If I work in geography, at times, very often I'm asked, "How is this what you are talking of?" My work, my personal work, I have worked with museums, I have worked with IR theory. My work is actually at the juncture of theory and technology. Therefore, we explore the different hues which are brought to the conceptualization of what we are looking at it as a subject. Any subject per se has very interesting and very different kind of understandings happening. So it's a very small size of scholarly work that I'm talking about, but it is happening. The impact is there. If we have to count, perhaps it is a minuscule amount, but we have begun the traditions in which this impact would be looked at. Then we look at future pedagogies. What is it that we will teach next? What will come in the next teachings, next understandings of where social sciences is going? One, I would tie up with Mr. Agarwal. I would really identify with you there because policy is very focused, policy is very data centric. You cannot have a broader policy without a particular kind of calculation. Who is the target? How much is the target? How have we selected the target? Is there an urgent need? What is the kind of need? In the larger policies which are available, where do we make the intervention? What should be the nature or what should be the face of that intervention? All of it comes in together. Then we look at what is innovation and what is it that we are bringing in. Where is our imagination? One of the major problems that Indian universities face today in understandings of social sciences is that there is a lack of interest. My question is there a lack of interest? Not really. There is a lack of understanding which is developing, perhaps. So the current debates about the future of social sciences and liberal arts in India actually focuses on issues like declining interest in the field, the impact of privatization on education, and the need for more funding for social science research. All of three which are equally valid in their own senses. But the concern is that they are losing their interest because they do not see it as a paying factor in their lives after this. Students say sometimes that they're reluctant to pay the higher fees of, say, private universities. But my question here is, all universities are not private. Most universities in India are public universities, and there is a huge load on the public universities. So, students, are they really losing interest in social sciences, or is it a rhetoric that we are seeing which is being promulgated? The second is the perception of social science, what I mentioned earlier, as a less lucrative field compared to the professional disciplines like medicine and engineering. You can get a BA honors degree and supposedly you will not get any job because your employability becomes a factor or a question there. So this is what we mean by when we understand the commodification of education, where degrees and certificates are seen as primary goals rather than knowledge acquisition, which is also impacting the field. What we do not understand is that national public preoccupations, which continue to structure the knowledge production and its reception within a pluricentric academic world. We argue that though the loci of the enunciation affect processes of both knowledge production and consumption, global flows of ideas and resources do not always translate into paid or understandable work into a simple relation of which disciplines should be more wanted, which discipline should not be there. So, the relationship of hegemony between what is known as the hierarchy of disciplines. So, within an asymmetry in resources, it is existing in every field. What I bring to you now is, I think all of the senior people or people who have even read a little bit would recognize this map. This is a map which was made by a physician way back in 1854. This is John Snow's map on the cholera outbreak in London. In 1854, a physician trained in mechanics of medicine and understandings of what we bring in today superimposed this factor of this map on this which was already available to him through the local bourses. Now, John Snow was a very eminent physicist of that times. Cholera outbreak was killing massive amounts of people. Areas were becoming depopulated. Cholera and plague had depopulated Europe earlier also in the 13th and the 14th centuries when there were supposed to be no cures. But John Snow went around using this kind of a survey method. The survey methods are not taught in medicine. They were integral parts of what is known as social science education. He went on then mapping, which is again a discipline which is very far away from the medicine. He used what is known commonly in geography teaching at the very basic level as dot method of creating centers where by the size of the dots we can understand what is the total population indicated. John Snow's dots indicate where the population were mostly impacted with cholera. And therefore, he came to this understanding that it is the public water sources, some of the public water sources which were contaminated with that bacteria. And that is why it was flowing. Now, this is from one of my own research. This is the spread of alien invasive plant species in the Manas National Park in Assam. Now, this is a contribution of at least 5 people. One, a botanist. To me, it was my conception to do some work like this. This is from, once again, from the geography discipline by a hydrologist and a specialist in remote sensing. This is once again my own work where we plot different kinds of, say, scatter plots. What are we trying to understand? That yes, even in the spread of plants, something which is particularly studied only by botanists, hydrologists, soil scientists, social science people, taking in the stories of how the plants appeared, whether they were indigenous to that area, what were the indigenous knowledge practices which were done or which are really conducted to battle out such influences, is what this paper is all about. Very soon, it is to be published from one of the Elsevier science journals. So this is what we come when we use innovation as imagination. And finally, my college, Miranda House, we have strived to inculcate these understandings. This is what the internship programs in my college is, which we do for 6 weeks. You can look at the topics, you can look at all of it. We are also training them in entrepreneurship and in creating different kinds of business ideas from the very basics of what they learn. We have a 6 weeks internship program. Everybody is welcome to apply to these. This is especially for your students, so that we can see that innovation as imagination, innovations in social sciences, which actually contribute and at the base of different kinds of disciplinarity developments as well as in the corporate world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for that lovely talk. I would really request Professor Gupta if you can share that internship opportunity in my WhatsApp as well, so that we can share it with our students who would be interested to know. Thank you so much, ma'am, for that enlightening talk. And the last speaker that we have with us, I think overall, what we are talking about, largely the history maybe of liberal arts education in this country. How do you make liberal arts, as Professor Gupta said, that the problem that social sciences, and I think somewhere social sciences never lost its charm. You still have, at least in Delhi University, you still have the highest people enrolling in social science disciplines, be it political science or sociology, or even in psychology, if you can call that within the realm of social sciences and behavioral sciences. So there is obviously students who definitely want to go for these disciplines. The idea that at least me as a student has also faced, that you rightly pointed out, is the employability question, maybe. And I think when we have the open forum, I would like Yash to answer that as well. How do you make, what are the gaps that are already existing in the curriculum space, or even in the way social sciences is being taught, where the employability question is far off? And right now, I think what I have also faced in the past 5, 6 years, the space of employability in social sciences has also changed. In disciplines which were totally dominated with an academic career, now you have the private sectors where you have political scientists and international relation. Economics always had that edge of getting into a bank, maybe for an analyst. But now I see a lot of people entering the political sciences or social sciences from these particular domains into the private sector as well. So there is a space, but I also see that there is a huge gap also between how do you access liberal arts education and the corporate sector as well. So here I think the last topic that we have is, I might have some problem elements with the topic in general also, which is, I don't know, maybe indigenization as a word also has its own discourse setting. But the topic was regional languages, indigenous knowledge, and the decolonizing of social sciences. And this is something that last night I was going through a university's faculty page. And in the morning, we were having this conversation that largely the entire space was dominated by people who were trained from universities from the West. And this is a university in India. So when we talk about decolonization, we talk about internalization of colonial ideas in general, I still feel that there is a remnant of colonialism that exists even the way we conceptualize liberal arts or social sciences. And here I think Professor Dr. Shayan De would be able to say a lot of things, because his background is totally in this particular area. He is an assistant professor and a department chair at Bayan College, affiliated to Purdue University, Northwest Oman. His latest monograph, titled Garbocracy Towards a Great Human Collapse, was published in 2025 with Peter Lang. He was awarded the Nicholas Cristobal, forgive my pronunciation, Guillen Batista Outstanding Book Award for Performing Memories and Weaving Archives in 2025 by the Caribbean Philosophical Association. His larger research interests are very fascinating, at least for me, which is post-humanism, decolonial studies, environmental studies, critical race studies, culinary epistemologies, and critical diversity literacy. And when I was reading out this biography, I realized that Professor Day, in his own biography, missed a work which he had sent me a few months back, which is Green Academia. And I still remember that because that was the first conversation I had with him for my own YouTube channel, at least. But that was a lovely conversation, and the entire conversation was on alternative pedagogies, if I remember it correctly. And I think there we can maybe end this entire webinar with a way of understanding liberal arts education from an alternate lens. Because what I understood from the three panelists is that there is a crisis in the pedagogy as well, right? So maybe over to you, Dr. De. This topic, I think, will be brilliant as the ending of this webinar. Over to you, Dr.
Yeah, thank you so much, Abhimanyu and Ashish, for the warm invitation and curating this fantastic panel. And thank you to the fellow panelists, because I think one of the common takeaways for me, which you also rightly pointed out, Abhimanyu, is to address the question of grassroots, which is a repetitive question, but I believe it's a never-ending question, and it should be a never-ending question. Now, what I will try to do for the next 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, is trying to unpack the question of decolonization widely in the Indian context. And obviously, as I say, that it's a very diverse perspective. We cannot just talk about anything and everything. But one aspect that bothers me with respect to my work on music, on food, on the question of pedagogies, on the question of curriculums, on the question of environment. And because I am sort of my approach towards decolonization, I would always say, is very undisciplined and tentacular in nature, rather than trying to understand decolonization in the elite space, in fortified spaces. And one question that I think it's essential for all of us to think, and I'm also thinking loudly along with all of us, is what does it mean to decolonize in the practical context? And I think this is a local question. It can be understood in the context of India, in the context of our local spaces in India. And also it's a universal question. I mean, if we widely see the narratives, especially the decolonial activists who work at the grassroots level with communities, with cultures, with societies, with diverse forms of scenarios, they keep on asking this question because we have already engaged in a lot of theoretical perspectives. We have got theories in terms of how to decolonize. We have got theories, what does it mean to engage in a decolonial turn? We have got endless number of works engaging with decolonial methodologies in research. But very unfortunately, and at least in the Indian context, I would surely highlight that our engagement with decolonization has mostly been restricted within the very fortified spaces, whether we are talking about classrooms, whether we are talking about conferences, or maybe just events like this. As on the one side, I don't deny that it is essential for us to engage in conversations. It is essential for us to theorize, to engage with the methods of decolonization. But on the other side, it is deep down essential to understand the applicability of it, the practical applicability of it. And within the wider liberal arts space, because what is really interesting and to a certain extent ironical as well, that we are trying to understand liberal arts at the grassroots level. We are trying to understand liberal arts at the community level, especially when the evolution of liberal arts, if you look at the history of the evolution of liberal arts in the United States, was very much in the realm of elitism. Again, as I told, that I am not someone who is totally dismissive of liberal arts. In fact, there are a lot of dynamics, especially with the question of interdisciplinary dynamics that we talk about liberal arts, is deep down essential. It is also a way of questioning the enclaves of disciplines, the hierarchies of disciplines that was highlighted by the previous panelists. But then we also have to understand that we have to de-elitize liberal arts. And how we do that is, again, a collective question. Obviously, I don't have an immediate response to that. And why do I ask this question? Because especially when we are talking about the future of social sciences, especially we also are trying to see the future of social sciences within the liberal arts platform. And then comes the question of decolonization, along with the other questions about literature and nationalism and policymaking that have been raised thus far. What is important for us to understand is, when we say that we need to decolonize, we need to understand where do we start from. Because one thing that is really encouraging in the socio-political context, in the cultural context, also in the widely, we can say, in the academic context of India as well, especially in the field of higher education, it is only, I would say, over the last 10 to 12 years where we are engaging with the diverse narratives of decolonization at the common public spaces. Now, what do I mean by common public space is where we are spaces that facilitate daily life conversations. And as I rightly mentioned at the beginning, that decolonization was always there, but it was restricted within very fortified spaces. But to engage with decolonization in terms of reviving our cultural roots, our traditional roots, in terms of having our pride in our own languages, our native languages, that aspect, that grassroots aspect, is kind of a recent phenomenon. Now, this is very encouraging. This is very positive, because it is a to a vast extent, it's a decolonial process, but there is also quite a major challenge to it that I wish to flag off. Now, what is happening is, in the process of trying to engage, of reviving our traditional cultures, our respective languages associated with our lifestyles and various other perspectives, we are often falling into the trap, consciously as well as unconsciously, of provincialism and chauvinism. Now, what do I mean by provincialism and chauvinism is that when we are on the one side, we are trying to revive literature, we are trying to revive culture, we are trying to revive music, we are trying to revive pedagogies in our local languages, but there is also a slight birth of intolerance towards other languages. And we can see that language politics was always there in the country, but then what we see as a recent phenomenon, especially in a lot of states, where there's a language intolerance, where on the one side, in the process of ensuring that our respective mother tongue is widely respected, we are often trying to cancel out the linguistic roots of other communities. Now, this chauvinism is deep down problematic, and it is not just with respect to languages, because language happens to be an essential perspective in my presentation today. We can share this with various other perspectives as well. We can talk it into the context of religion. We can talk about it in the context of political ideologies. We can talk about it in the context of various other socio-political practices where there is this inherent and a problematic birth of intolerance. Now, what happens is, this is not just happening for the first time. I mean, and it's not just relevant and it's not just restricted in the Indian context. I mean, even if we look at general decolonial movements or the history of decolonial movements across the world, if we take examples from Latin America, we say in Australia, or widely in the continent of Africa, parts of Asia, we would see that this chauvinism have caused a lot of damage to the whole policy or the approaches or the phenomenon of decolonization with which the movement was initiated across the globe. Because one very foundational aspect of decolonization, we have to remember that it is about embracing, respecting, caring, and sharing each other's cultures, traditions, values with each other. It is not about canceling out each other. It is not about being intolerant towards each other. It is not about, highlighting one particular language, one particular religion, one particular knowledge system, and trying to label it as indigenous, trying to label it as traditional, and exporting them across the globe as something which is decolonial. And sadly, to a vast extent, not in every aspect, to a vast extent, this is what India is currently encountering. Whether we look at the curricular transformations, whether we look at the pedagogical transformations, in general, the infrastructural approaches or the infrastructural transformations that the higher education systems in India are currently undergoing, we see there is a consistent tendency of selecting few publicly, globally popular cultural aspects and promoting them as a decolonial practice or promoting them as a decolonial vision against various other perspectives. And this is where I think, we often end up being tokenistic when we use the word indigenous. And as you rightly mentioned, I mean, the terms like indigenous, terms like tribals are deep down questionable and contested. Although in certain circumstances, they are applicable, and those identities, those terminologies are genuinely celebrated, but in various contexts, they are deep down questionable. Especially when we look at, in general, and with this, I would like to conclude, maybe I can speak more when we have question, answers, and reflections, is when we are talking about indigenousness, there is also a very deep down underlying tokenism or tokenistic practices that goes with indigenous representations. Yes, one may argue that, we have, our president, we have now many representations from diverse so-called indigenous tribal communities across the country. We are seeing that a lot of the national level awards, our international level awards, are being given to individuals who emerge from the indigenous communities, and the numbers have recently increased, which is deep down encouraging. But again, we have to have a critical reflection. We just cannot sit on these data. We cannot sit on these public popular representations and come to the conclusion that that India is going back to the indigenous knowledge systems. Because when we, at the practical level, when we look at the cultural and the socio-political level of the conditions of the cultural, social, linguistic conditions of the communities widely in the northeastern parts of India, when we look at how forest laws are being violated and indigenous communities are being uprooted from their natural land spaces in the name of security and just allowing the private sector enterprises to build industries and factories there, when we look at certain cultural programs where indigenous communities are on a lot of occasions compelled or allured to perform a certain kind of dance or perform a certain kind of music just for the sake of representing the so-called sham of cultural diversity of India. When you look at these perspectives, you have to be critical. And I think here what I'm trying to tell is, and with this I'll conclude, that I'm not here to provide solutions. Honestly, I don't have the magic wand to provide solutions. But what is essential for us to loudly think, and what I want to provoke all of us, is before trying to find the solutions, we really need to locate the right problems. And again, I will conclude with this foundational question that when we're talking about decolonization, when we're talking about the future of social sciences, when we're trying to understand a very elitist dimension like liberal arts and trying to de-elitize it, trying to engage with the local knowledge perspectives, we have to be very careful and we have to be very diverse, critically diverse in our approaches, and not fall into the trap of tokenistic representations and initiatives, which unfortunately we still continue to do. I think I'll end here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Day. It's a pleasure. I think the way you ended it, let me just try to interpret it in my own terms, which is you said that you have to, before even asking for the solutions, the right problem is necessary, right? Let me escalate to the point where, right, if you ask the right questions, the problem is halfway solved. So maybe that's how you can interpret, or all of us, we can interpret the crisis, or when there is a crisis, there is an opportunity as well. So in that order, from an optimistic point of view, maybe that's what the over idea of even coming up with a conclave mode, where we wanted to create an open space where we can discuss the challenges that social sciences face in India. And maybe once we can ask the right questions, maybe the attendees, I think some of them, I think there are journalists as well, I can see some of them, we can apply it in our own context, and rightly pointed out that these conversations should not just exist in Zoom workplace. It should go beyond that, and maybe we will be able to do that. So now the floor is, I think, open for everyone. Yash just messaged me. He actually was part of another seminar, so he had to leave. So with respect to employability options, I can address some questions maybe, but the floor is open for the attendees. The way we can do this is, if you have a question, you can raise your hands through that option in Zoom, and then I can just allow you the chance to speak, or even you can write down your query. So that's how we can do it. By that time, when you are articulating or even raising your hands, I have just preliminary few things that I was wondering about. The first one, I think, where Professor Gupta had started the conversation, and I think Professor Krishna Unni and Dr. Shayan also can add on to this question, because this was something that I was reading recently, which is the incorporation of artificial intelligence does not have that much threat in the STEM discipline as they have in the STEAM discipline, which is if you include arts and social sciences maybe. So how do you look at maybe navigating a subject or a discipline like social sciences where you have artificial intelligence disruptions? Do you see it as an opportunity, or do you see it as a threat? Because the pedagogies are very dependent on creative thinking in social sciences, at least. So how do you keep the creativeness intact when everything is prompt oriented? So I'm just, it's not a joke maybe, but yeah, it's funny, where someone was never telling me this joke, is that Now it's like the paper is being set with a prompt and the student is answering with a prompt. So it's like two prompts having a conversation in a social science classroom. How do you navigate that? So maybe Professor Gupta and then Professor Unni and then Professor Dey, you can engage accordingly. Anyone, please feel free. By that time, anyone, if you have an additional question, you can raise your hands. Thank you.
I think Professor Bashabi can start first, and after that, I will give my opinion.
Yes,
Right.
yes, absolutely.
My senior, you are a lot my senior. You've been our teacher also. I mean, when I was a student here. So, anyways, okay, let me begin.
Yeah.
Yes, AI is a major threat in today's world. We keep on getting recycled answers from ChatGPT, from Gore, from any number of people or things. But at the same time, I will say it's smart device or a smart technique in very unsmart hands. Students don't yet know how to really explore all of it. They are stuck. You have given them an assignment. They want data or matter based on that particular assignment. So the wordings stay the same. For a teacher, it's very easy to pick out if it's a chat GPT or it's a self-written one. So what we do in our classrooms, this is not just dependent upon the pedagogy, but also on the understanding of the teacher. Sometimes I really get very angry, and this I'm talking on a personal level. I call out the problems and I tell them I have a very simple method. I simply give them a copy of the chat GPT and their own copy, and I ask who should I give the marks to? You or the other person, whoever has written this. But that comes when I'm at the end of my tether. We do have engaging ways of dealing with all of this. The impact of AI cannot be denied because it is there in everything. Today, students and young people, more than us, and even us to a certain degree, we have forgotten numbers. We don't remember, we do not recall any very close friends, very close relatives, our own phone numbers. We are much more used to the tap on the phone. That's also AI. It has impacted our memories, it has impacted how we work, how we think, how we talk, because everything seems at a fingertip. But I also do an exercise that is when, because my discipline gives me that freedom to take students out into the field, do real field work with them in the villages, in the depths of even forests or even the small localities. Like very recently in April, I was with my students in an area in Sariska Tiger Reserve, which had only two villages. It was inside the reserve. Both the villages were being location was being changed because they were in the fire zone. So, and there was intense resistance from the people to coming out. So, at least what I did gave my students an insight that always the policy which is there may not be acceptable. And the reasons why they are not acceptable were also there. So you do need hands-on experience. No AI can at all substitute for your real world out of the classroom experience. In the classroom also, there are multiple such examples. It depends upon us to understand. And by all these inculcations, we hope to inculcate in the students, the future social scientists, that ethics and morality matters. We cannot simply take something which is not ours and present it as ours. It is a very simple instance, not just of cheating, but also of deeper malaise within our own selves, which we do at times refuse to accept and acknowledge. Because if I ask that student to reproduce any part of that assignment, which was written by AI, it doesn't come. The words are not the same. Actually, the way we write is like a signature. So it's very difficult to be copied.
Professor
Yes.
Krishna Unni, yeah.
Yeah. I have something to add to what Professor Bashabi pointed out. I agree completely with Professor Bashabi. But in liberal arts, AI works slightly different also. Because the point is, the other day I happened to see a very fascinating reel where Cristiano Ronaldo is playing against an AI, soccer player. So the AI machine is more equipped in football rather than Cristiano Ronaldo. Cristiano Ronaldo is a person with all of us, like all of us. He's having hands, legs, and so he's not like something like a Terminator, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who acted in the movie Terminator. Schwarzenegger himself was the California governor. And very fascinatingly in the reel, it is shown that Cristiano Ronaldo immediately makes a certain kind of, cubbles or whatever, dribbles. And by excellent dribbling, he is overcoming the AI. So the real question of the reel that, which is circulating, I know some of you might have seen that reel also, which constantly comes up in WhatsApp and everywhere, and Facebook everywhere. So the real question is the tussle between the empirical teleological condition of our brain, our imagination, fighting against, incriminating against with a machine. All right. And when machine is there to supplement many things, as Professor Bashabi pointed out, the central question remains that in liberal arts studies and social sciences, can the machine at any point of time overcome or overwhelm our imagination? And there was a news in the New York Times, which again I was fascinated by the news. I discussed this news in the classroom, that one of the AI machine died. You know how it died? It died out of depression. Just imagine. We are having trauma centers, we are having centers for depression, how to overcome depression or whatever. And here in the United States, one of the AI machine died of depression. So that gives the other side of the picture, which because AI is also like human beings. Of course, AI machines cannot make love, with human beings. That's a different thing. But human beings are dependent on the AI machine in an age of, these liberal studies. All right. So the question entirely is, as Bashabi pointed out, on our dependency. Now, if we are taking our students or if you're going with our colleagues or with our friends to some of these, site-specific regions, villages, farmhouses, or even museums or wherever, are we accompanying our AI machines also? Definitely not. So there we have a maximum extravagance of how to use of our imagination. But we need to make it very, very clear that liberal arts cannot be overwhelmed or cannot be over manipulated by any kind of AI machine. In that case, that is the death of the humanities. That will be the death of the social sciences. That will be the death of liberal arts, because the idea of the liberal itself will be completely innervating with the AI machines. But we cannot deny the existence of the AI on both sides, on our left side and the on our right side. Lot of deliveries are taken in the hospitals by the AI machines, and AI machines are in connection with a lot of our surveillance systems. That is even a very, very dangerous aspects. Even otherwise, we are under complete surveillance. All right, Pegasus and other kinds of surveillance. I don't have to elaborate on that. So if AI also is making a surveillance while we are in conjunction with the AI to do a work get done, in that case, we are going to be in a terrible crisis. Terrible, terrible crisis. I think a lot of social scientists across the globe, they are discussing, they are trying to evolve a formula, okay, on at what level can we go with the AI and at what level can be dissociated from the AI. But it's a very crucial aspect that AI should not completely overwhelm our imaginations. It should not overtake our rivers, and the entire demography, and also the landscapes. All right. I still remember one of the keynote speeches which I delivered in Kathmandu University a few months ago. I ended my keynote by talking about the AI machines getting into the landscapes and turning the landscapes into something else. The topic of the conference was on the landscapes, the political and literary imagination landscapes. So this is where we need to draw a clear line as far as the liberal studies, social sciences, and humanities are concerned. The AI should be curtailed from some of the innovative and also some of the imaginative plateaus of our journey to progress. But we cannot deny the existence of AI. AI is important as far as certain other things the work is concerned. The question is on which type of work will be assigned to the AI. And will AI become our constant companion? That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Before Dr. Day, let me just escalate the question further for you to answer. Like recently, I think this is also something that has gone viral, which is Geoffrey Hinton's speech, Nobel speech, where he has kind of warned about the future escalation of AI. Because right now we are all in the beta version, maybe when AI disruption is much grander, where maybe right now it's in a stage where there is generative AI, but in a stage where it has reached to a level of consciousness, will there be a threat of escalation or disruption? Dr. Dey. Yeah, and then I think Nikhil sir, and I think I have seen another question. We can answer that. Dr. Dey, then Nikhil sir, you're free to ask.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. I think I would be very brief uh, because this is a question, I think it's troubling for all of us in a lot of ways. The one thing is that what is really important for us to understand and remember is that right now, standing currently, our understanding in AI is kind of lying on the two different poles. One side is where we are being very dismissive about AI, and there are many obvious reasons. And on the other side, where we are being very celebratory about AI. Now, one thing, and again, coming from my respective perspectives, is, and when certain challenges that have already been raised, like for instance, in terms of assignments, in terms of plagiarism, and all of these perspectives, we need to have a very free flowing, open discussion, and most importantly, sensitization about AI. One thing we have to remember that on the one side, no matter how much we try to ditch AI, and it is coming from a person who himself is very, very critical about AI, it's difficult to, avoid AI in certain circumstances. But then what is happening is, like, for example, if I take a very random, simple example, if I'm trying to teach methods, a general course on methods in social sciences, I'm teaching in the class, I'm preparing whatever I know, whatever I'm reading, I'm giving verbal deliveries, I may have PPT presentations, I may do case studies, but on a lot of circumstances, what is happening is students are coming back with assignments which are entirely AI generated. They put the term, they will put the method, and then they will come back with a response. They will come back with an assignment which is totally AI generated. Now, that consciousness has to be put out, because a simple fundamental justification to it is, if it is available on the AI and so many conversations on the justifications of AI is going on, then why cannot we generate our responses through AI? And one essential reason why we are failing to address this concern, because there is a lack of an open debate about AI. We have like two big groups. One side is saying no AI, whatever it is. One side is saying yes AI, whatever it is. That sensitization, we are having workshops. Even when I look around, again, a very generic observation, when I look around, we see different institutions are organizing workshops in AI. Usually there is a lack of critical debate on those workshops. Either you see it is all about celebrating, mostly, in fact, it is all about celebrating how AI can revolutionize the world, how AI can give us a bright future, and you see all of those glaring, colorful posters always seducing us to indulge ourselves into AI activities. And then there will be a small minority who will remain silent during the workshop, but during the lunch hours and tea time, they will have their own space, and where they will obviously critique AI. In this way, we really cannot find suitable solutions. So my takeaway, my point of argument will be that there is a necessity of sensitizing and open public sensitization about AI. Instead of choosing two major poles, I think sensitization, open sensitization is deep down very important.
Thank you, Dr. Dey. Nikhil sir, I think you had a question.
Hello, yes. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the panelists for such diverse outlooks on social sciences. I was very happy when Dr. Day talked about the subaltern and the critique of the post-colonial studies from the subaltern and indigenous perspective, and that's where my questions stance, because I think I would like you to elaborate more on how these these critique of post-colonial and decolonial studies from the subaltern perspective, from the indigenous perspective, will change or can change social sciences in India. I also open this question to Professor Krishna Unni and Professor Boshby, because they have experience in public universities, and the largely how we study social sciences has been largely adopted from the West. Even when we have created our subjects which are based on India, we have created in a very perspective of the West. And I think it is very important and significant if the subaltern critique can really change how we develop our pedagogy and syllabus later and curriculum later. This is one question. Two, just a general question to the whole panel, that how do you see the responsibility, like how we are moving now in Indian education spaces is privatization of everything. So privatization of education and social sciences also is happening, and largely it will change how students come to universities. They will largely engage with private universities. So how do you see that private universities are now like how much responsibility, the onus of responsibility that they have to engage with society and with social sciences per se? So these are my two questions.
Yes, I can. I think, Dr. Day, I think the first question was from your speech, so we can start with you and then Professor Unni and Professor Gupta.
Sure. Thank you so much, Nikhil, for this question. I think it's a very important question, and it takes us back to the aspect of whenever we are talking about the perspectives of rethinking social sciences from the lens of subalternity. I think it's important for us to engage with the question of praxis. Because again, I'll leave aside every theory, every philosophy. I'll go back to very practical instances, because I have taught in very few universities in India, and those are mostly private, and not mostly, they are absolutely private sector universities. And there we were given this liberty to frame our own curriculums, right? Now, obviously, it goes through different levels. Like as a teacher, I frame my curriculum, then it goes to the dean and etc. All of those usual bureaucratic levels before we get a final approval that we can go ahead with the curriculum and teach in the classroom. Now, when I usually frame my curriculums, the first thing that always, that I reason with my own self is, if it is practically viable, if it is practically applicable, whatever theories, whatever texts, whatever context I'm talking about, to what extent the learners, the diverse group of cultural learners that are there in my classroom, will be able to relate themselves from their respective contexts. And a major challenge that I encountered while framing the syllabus through this lens, a major challenge that I encountered, and that will often come back as a feedback, is that my curriculum doesn't have enough theory. My curriculum is not enough universal. My curriculum is not enough, wide representation, because I am not taking into account enough globally established theoretical and methodological texts that have been sanctioned and approved by the West. Rather, my focus is more on those texts, more on those perspectives which are local, which are obviously very relevant, and which very proudly, at least I would say, have not been sanctioned by the West. Now, why I'm giving this example to respond to your question is the change in the attitude. The attitudinal representation has to change. See, subaltern as a theory, subaltern as a methodology, subaltern as a phenomenon, subaltern as a praxis. We have empty number of discussions, reflections, theories, philosophies that have been existing for decades now. Still, why are we still asking the same questions standing in 2025? We have to ask this out loudly. It means that whatever has happened so far at the theoretical and practical level, number one, many of those initiatives have gone wrong because where they were hijacked, they were produced and promoted by a very limited high caste, heteronormative group of elitist people, number one thing. Number two thing, when they have been applied, even if they have been applied in the practical level, they have gone into the wrong directions. And one of the many reasons for the wrong directions, because at the bureaucratic level, and that this is why I am giving this practical example, because at the bureaucratic level, the people who are sitting out there and is trying to tell us what is wrong and what is right on our behalf, they have to have this attitudinal transformation. I think there are multiple reasons, multiple perspectives can be there, but this attitudinal transformation is deep down necessary. And one of the foundational factors, at least for me, to bring this change in the social sciences, and which I think also, Nikhil, widely adds to your second question as well. Because, and there is this one interesting question I see in the chat box as well, where one says that now social sciences is all about preparing for competitive exams rather than thinking about theories and methodologies and practical transformations. I think in a lot of ways, what is happening is currently, with the, and even being a very staunch critique of NEP, not dismissive, to be very much on the clearer page, but a staunch critique of the NEP. One thing that is happening is, yes, we understand that marketability is essential. We understand that at the end of the education, if I'm doing my master's, if I'm doing my PhD, I'm not getting a proper job that I aspire for. It makes no sense. I totally understand. But when it is a blind marketability of the education system, what is happening is everything is getting pipelined through the job market. Now, when every vision, every aspect, every approach gets pipelined through the job market, that creates a deep down problem. And that is why we are seeing universities, they are shutting the sociology department. We see how the anthropology departments are in extreme crisis. This is one of the many reasons, because we are failing to, somewhat, we are failing to generate this consciousness that we don't read sociology for the sake of getting a master's or a PhD or a job, but also for practical sociological transformations. We need to read anthropology, we need to read literature, we need to read international relations. For political studies, obviously job factor is there, but that is not the only factor. It is also about transforming our social mindsets. We have workshops about inclusivity, we have workshops about diversity, but then when you go at the practical level, you still see so much of homophobia, you still see so much of heteronormativity, you still see so much of Islamophobia, you still so much of high elitist mania. This is one of the many reasons. And I think I'll stop here.
Yes, Professor Uni, do you want to add something? I think Dr. Dey has pretty much made Oman more hotter, but Dr.
Yes, on
Professor
this,
Uni, yeah.
yeah. See, on this question of subalternity, there is a large scale debate which is going on in many universities across the globe, in the West, in the East, and everywhere. I will give you two anecdotes in which I was also there. I was part of these anecdotes. I'm a part of these anecdotes. See, a few years ago, there was the 25th anniversary of the subaltern studies at D School, Delhi School of Economics. Of course, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak came, and Spivak was very, very critical about the entire subaltern school there. Remember, Spivak as a thinker, as a theorist, was one of the persons who instigated this subaltern school at one point of time. And toward the end of her lecture, what she said was she wanted to resign from this entire process, entire acumen called subaltern studies, but her resignation was not accepted. And then, of course, Spivak was in her own, fashionable lecture, way of speaking about the problems of the subaltern. We all were very angry with her, honestly speaking, toward the end of the lecture. But later, when we sat together, we understood the fact that even the idea of the subaltern historiography, which we are teaching or which we are engaging in most of the places, private and the public universities or whatever, that itself is given to us in a couched form, because that itself is coming in an elitist form. See, with due respect to the great subaltern theorists, people like Ranjit Guha and many others, let me tell you that there is an elitist approach in the subaltern studies as far as the liberal humanities is concerned, especially in India right now. Okay, So the second, aspect which is connected to that is, you asked me, because, Nikhil was asking me, how can it really decolonize and destructure the liberal studies? I don't really think that just because subaltern way of inculcating certain things will completely decenter or decolonize the liberal studies. I don't think so, honestly speaking, because that is a question of the essential difference between praxis and also theory. We know a lot of theory. We dabble in our theory. And we are interested to make theory more fashionable, refashionable, and through all these kinds of mechanisms, including chat GPT or whatever. But that is absolutely a negative way of understanding the subaltern. The question here is, within the subaltern school or in the subaltern studies, there are a lot of dark spaces. There are a lot of dark spots. There are many sections of the people who are not even included in the subaltern way of looking at history. These are the people whom I have seen who are living in the two and in the fray of two little mountains. And you know what is the food of these people? The food of these people is only parrots. Parrots. Okay, they go with their bow and arm, and they catch the parrots. And in order to get the oil to prepare to roast the parrots, they have to walk some 2 days and 2 nights to a very, very distant city. There are a lot of spaces in India where these kinds of hilly region people are there. All right. Did any subaltern historian or did any one of us incorporate them into the corpus of our discussion or whatever? In which class do they belong to? In which caste they do belong to? What kind of language they speak? But these are the people who are still there as the dark spots in the subaltern. So we need to totally re-examine the concept of the subaltern with a due respect to the great subaltern historians like Ranajit Guha, Partha Chatterjee, and many, many others. Most of them are my friends. All right, this is a very, very important aspect. Even in Australia, okay, there are tribes within the tribes. There are the internecine tribal warfares, which are happening across Australia, which is not even recorded. And the tribes within the tribes, they are put inside the certain kind of jungle, and obviously there is a power structure which burns all of them, and the next day the newspaper report is there is a jungle fire. Please remember, these jungle fires are the created fires, because jungles, obviously jungle fire is a natural one also, but there are the created jungle fires. So Nikhil, my suggestion, my strong opinion on this is, unless and until we move to the level of a total praxis regarding to understand the dark spots, the uncharted people in the discourse of the subaltern studies, we never can, propel, the liberal humanities and the social sciences. And very quickly, as far as your second question is concerned, well, there is a, since I teach in a public university for a long time, and since I am regularly visiting in all these private universities, I do understand the gulf between reception of students of various kinds of topics in the public and the private. All right. That very, very succinctly one need to operate, not with the help of the government or something like that. Because even in the private universities, inside the private universities, we must open up different chances of, for discussion. Otherwise, the point is, the public sensitization is going to be a major, major issues. So this is not simply a generic observation. This is an observation which is concerned with the different types of people who are reaching the private university to study just because of their income. And if you look at the sociologist Peter Slotschik exactly has articulated
Did we lose Professor Krishna only? I think.
I think so.
I think so.
Yeah, because of,
Yes.
yeah.
If I may round up what was said by Professor Dr. Day and Professor Rumi,
Yes, yes.
a few pointers. One, India has progressed a lot on technological fronts, We are very proud of our IITs, our IISERs, and our IISc. Nowhere in any Indian university till date is philosophy of science taught. Nowhere is there a debate or even a talk on the ethics of doing science or reading science. The words like doing science, reading science, ethics, plurality do not go together in our country. We are still at that nascent stage where we have not overcome the colonial thinking in creating these aspects within our own research systems. Whether it is in the undergraduate classroom, whether it is at the postgraduate classroom, I found the question on decolonialism very interesting. Also because we are all somewhere dabbling or understanding decolonialism in different manners, in different ways. And nobody, as such, has an actual answer on what is that it mean by decolonizing. Are we moving away? Are we incorporating? Are we taking some, leaving some? What is it that we would like to do or think? Professor Undi, in his original lecture, had mentioned two very interesting facts. One was colonialism, of course, and one was internal colonialism. Now, internal colonialism was a theory which was propounded way back in 1974 by Michael Hector, who was talking about the Irish condition. In India, there is a lot of internal colonialism work, research work which has come in. I was also a part of that research work. I have used it in my own work while looking at our enclaves, what we understand as the mining areas. Who are the populations impacted? The tribal populations. Do we at all look at them? Because for us, even in our studying factors, if we read Michael Hector, we also had to read Ashish Nandi's Intimate Enemy, which is talking of a different kind of psychoanalysis. What There were several questions that I also saw on your chat boxes on how do we make our classrooms more inclusive and the differences that Dr. Day spoke about in the private and the public universities. The perception of the social sciences will always remain because a large proportion of a population is not able to afford. Let me be honest, the affordability of a private university is very high. Even with the amount of scholarships or grants that you give to the people, if the students are not really very interested and very high scoring marks, it is not possible for them. The second impediment is the student might be very motivated and very highly qualified, but the parents are not. For the student in India to progress at all to that kind of a situation also means home support. If the home or the social spaces in which they inhabit, their own lives, if those are not supportive, they cannot move. Their entire intelligence is simply, if I may say so, spread out in different manners. This is again an anecdote that I will present from a lot of teaching experience. I had a top grade student. She was a girl. Her father was a daily wage labor, but the girl had 98.8%. Her father was insisting that she study here, though the girl was from commerce. She was not from the social sciences and humanities. Her aim was to become an CA. She never got the opportunity to study a commerce course because in my college we do not have commerce courses. That girl today is a very successful, very highly lauded IAS officer. Of course, she has to channel that intelligence somewhere. At Miranda House, we were able to give a plethora of choices, which she still accepts. She says that, yes, I could think. My question is, how many people, even in the nascent stages, are actually able to think, are actually able to imagine and understand reels, something which has become the ubiquitous time spending, not TV shows, not movies, not music, not storybooks, not cartoons, anime, manga, nothing. Reels is something which is very easily available to them, and the WhatsApp University, which throws different kinds of facts to them. Now, all of this is a bubbling cauldron. We still don't know what should will be the end. Will it implode? Will it bring a sense of balancing? Are we going to end up? We don't know. What we only know is the process. and how we as individual teachers or educators, or even you in your own lives, can really bring small changes to whatever we are doing. So I think I finished my talk here. I think our time is also up. Thank you to the entire Manav Rachna University faculty, to Mr. Basu for helping us, keeping us to our times. Thank you so much. And of course, a heartfelt gratitude to my fellow colleagues and panelists. It was very interesting to hear you. And as usual, I go back enriched. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. I think we can wrap up with one last question where let me take the privilege of jumbling up all the questions for you. I think Vishal sir has a question. Vishal sir. Uh, and Avrodeep Shah has two questions, but largely I think Avrodeep's question has been answered in a way, which is the UPSC angle to social sciences in India, as well as Sundaresa's question. I think it was answered by Professor Krishna only about how do you decolonize the classroom itself. So I think Vishal sir, you are the last question. I give you that privilege at least you
Thank you.
just because you sit beside me.
Thank you, Mr. Basu, for the privilege. And yeah, I mean, for the excellent session also. Congratulations to you as an organizer and to Ashish. And obviously, the set of panelists. Thank you for taking your time out. So, my question, I mean, I could not, unfortunately, be a part of the entire session. So, I just had an opportunity to basically listen to Professor Krishna's talk. And my question is for him only. So, I would like to go back to what he proposed the argument of decontextualizing the canon and the entire idea about the teleological rigidity sort of has its own exploitative tendencies. So my inquiry is that how, as a faculty teaching liberal arts, how can we uh, achieve our purpose of decontextualizing it through students and by us? Is it only at a narrative level or a discourse level, or does it also has an element of, let's say, some sort of an activism that can be brought into the curriculum and pedagogy, and collectively probably challenges and allows us to sort of transcend the forces that have been defined as having a certain purpose in the teleological sense? And secondly, about the argument about the nationality and all, as in, I mean, given the rise of, I mean, right wing all over the world, I mean, in significant parts of the world, we could see that. So, this space for problematizing identity of a nationality. So, how much of that can it be safely executed to the students? Because, I mean, the point that you also mentioned about, we need to be not overly cautious about what the government wants us to say. So, is there a sort of a basic framework or a basic structure that we could see possibly evolving at a global level that allows us to safely play our own narratives and problematize nationality in a subtle and in a different way, which is sort of critical to what the mainstream or the government would want us to have? So, yeah, thank you. These are my questions.
Now, Professor Munni.
Professor Unni, yes.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Okay, you can hear me.
Yes.
All right. So my net connection was slightly flickering, so that was the issue. I will go to your second question first. Yes, that is a very important concern because all over the world, not only in India, there is an absolute right-wing rise. There is a rise of these right-wing factions everywhere. Europe is getting affected, America is getting affected, and India particularly. One way because most of the academics in our time, they are under the threat because your classroom lectures are also, secretly, recorded. And it is your WhatsApp is under surveillance. So we are living in a world of surveillance, and even our classrooms are not the open spaces sometimes. We realize this because our own people may be able to, give our names to the authorities finally. And finally, we know that what is happening across our country in many campuses including the recent, event, the incident that had happened in Ashoka. All right. So one way of dealing with this is to generate a more democratic outlook within the classroom. So we have to talk about the dangers in which both the students and the teachers are in. Even the students are not very free from these kinds of dangers. Without offering a critique of any text, we cannot talk about nation and nationalism. That is simply not possible. So a text which we teach is, is there for multiple interpretations which are connected to the canon, the social relations, the various kinds of power attitudes, and the rest of the things. Here, we are not talking about either one group of people overwhelming others or the other group of people subsuming. So every teacher, being a conscientious teacher, it should be our duty to make our students understand the fact that there are dangers like this, but please remember, none of us are free from these dangers, so that we have to combine together to energize our democratic fundamentals. Once the democratic fundamentals inside the classroom are gone, we are totally disappeared. Teaching community will disappear, whether in private or in public. And most of the private universities are under threat more than the public universities. This is a very, very daring and a glaring fact. All right. So we need to evolve a strategy like that. Now, let me go back to your first question. I will tell you from my experience how I am decolonizing the text and the context. I do take my children, I do take my students to various regions of Delhi, outside Delhi, to make them understand the community lives. And the community consciousness, once the community consciousness comes, the community consciousness will clearly give the idea that, okay, the students will come out of the narrow cocoons and the narrow parameters of a textual knowledge to understand the wider ideas, how to perpetuate a text into that of a community kind of an outlook. That is extremely important. Decolonization does not mean that we need to talk about the decolonizing ideas like Boogie Wati and Go and many, many others inside the classroom. Never. Okay, you can mention them. That is important as a kind of an examination point of view. But the real decolonization of the classroom is only possible by taking the students out of the classroom to the community consciousness, to the community levels. Let them interact with the different kinds of people. Let us go to the kotas and kotis, where even the prostitutes, floozies, and all those people are there. Otherwise, how can you teach a text of, a biography or a memoir of by a sex worker? We teach about the sex workers, but none of the students are having any idea what the life of a sex worker is all about. All right. So this is an extra attitude which some teachers have to take. I think all teachers have to do that. But I'm sure of the fact that many teachers may not be able to do that. All right. Let us go to the deaf and dumb school, where the deaf and dumb children are studying. And that will give an excellent picture how to look at disability studies, or the studies of the specially abled in our time. So that is going to be a real decolonizing attitude of the classroom and the text. And this is something which some of us inside Delhi University, inside JNU, and inside some of the private universities are doing. But how many of us can really engage with this kind of a thing? Then only the question of decolonizing the canon and the given formulae and other kinds can be applicable. And only we will progress from the caveats of darkness to, as I said, a big pantheon of light, where our students along with us will be able to have certain fundamental ideas regarding what the life of different communities is all about. So that is my submission.
If
Thank
I
you,
may
sir.
add to it a little bit in
Yes.
one line,
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
understand the difference between practice and praxis. Where do you use practice?
Yes.
Where do you use praxis? Is what the response could be, also to the questions which were posed. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I think Avradeep is very persistent with his question. Let me try to wrap up the answers. What I could understand from the distinguished panelists is that first thing about the UPSC and the government exam thing that happens in India, and this is a very unique experience in India. It's only that you see, for example, in Britain or in United States, a diplomat is not coming from a three-tier examination. A diplomat comes from a long chain. A professor becomes a diplomat for a few years if deputed by the Secretary of State, right? So this is very unique to India, where there is a generalist exam that happens in UPSC. And fortunately or unfortunately, social science by nature has always been a product or an entire forum maybe generating UPSC aspirants in general. And that reason is also because of our colonial legacy that we attach to UPSC, or the power that is attached to it. My overall thesis always becomes that if you just minus subtract the power from IS officer or a IFS officer, I think the kind of application that comes for UPSC will significantly go lower. So at this point of time, it is the most accessible, the most democratic examination that exists. So if somebody wants to have instant success overnight, quote unquote societal success, UPSC is the fastest way to do it. But unfortunately, that fastest route becomes 6-7 years of a journey by nature. So social science always has that edge in India. But I think with information, with social media, the overall prestige attached to UPSC is also changing, with people who are in the coaching sector as well coming up and saying that this is not the only way out. So people are also having a conversation about it, and things are changing in the space as well. And the next question, I think, with respect to what you addressed about what is the purpose of social sciences in general, I think what Professor Unni was also articulating it very perfectly, way better than me maybe. The idea was that social sciences in general has two purposes, and these purposes have to be intact. You cannot compromise theorization with respect to having more practical oriented approaches as well. So both kind of researches, both kind of conversations should exist. And this is something I think Sundaresh sir is also here. And we used to talk about this a lot in our own space, is that you need theorists also, and you need policy professionals like Yash as well. But expecting Yash to be a theorist and some of us as policy analysts is unfair. So we all have a purpose, and we have chosen this purpose in our own way. And social science in general has to survive through this. So I think, thank you, everyone. I think, Dr. Dogra, if you can conclude the entire session with a vote of thanks. Let me give my thanks to all the panelists and all the speakers and the attendees who kept their time with us. And since the question started with how liberal can liberal arts be, so I had to be liberal with the timings as well. So Dr. Dogra, yeah, we can we can end with your vote of thanks.
Good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Thank you, Manu sir.
Yes,
I think it was truly a privilege to be. Okay. Thank you to all the panelists. I think it was truly a privilege to be part of this inspiring discussion. Professor Krishnan's call to take liberal arts out of the textbook and into the lived realities, especially through the lens of marginalized identity, was deeply inspiring. Professor Gupta's insights on fostering innovation through interdisciplinary approaches highlighted essential ways to push social sciences forward. And Dr. Shayan's powerful reflection on de-eliticizing and decolonizing liberal arts education, along with the urgent need to revisit and revive our culture, was equally inspiring. And his caution about the unconscious slide into provincialism reminded us of the delicate balance required to engage globally without losing our rootedness. I had a brief question for Mr. Yash, but I think he's not here. So thank you once again to everyone for this illuminating session. Thank you so much.
Thanks to Dean ma'am for allowing us to organize this thing. And hopefully we are planning to have an offline session as well in Delhi in the next 2 months maybe. And whoever is in Delhi, I think Dr. Dey, if you're visiting India anytime soon, please drop by in our university, and hope we can have this discussion with our students here. Professor Unni, Professor Gupta, thank you so much. Thank you, Dean ma'am, for letting us organize this. Thanks, everyone. And now you are free to leave, everyone. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you. Thank you.